Hello! This demo shows an example of how to use Oracle Spatial Studio in combination with Oracle Data Visualization. The data we're going to use here is completely fake, so this is made up. Let's assume that I'm working at an insurance company and a recent weather forecast has predicted that a hurricane would hit some of the regions in the US where we have customers and it could create a lot of damage. So we're interested in assessing the insured value that we have at risk with this hurricane. So I started by building a simple report joining two data sets. One is customer data set with several attributes and address information, and the other data set is policy with premium and coverage by customer. The next thing I'd like to do is to see which of these customers is located in the forecasted path of the tornado. And once I have identified these customers, assess the total coverage value that I have at risk. I first need to plot all my customers on a map. So I have their addresses, but I need to find out the lat and long of each address to plot them in a map. So I have to geocode this. To do this easily, I will use Spatial Studio. So I've just logged in Spatial Studio. This is a different Oracle application. It looks very much like data visualization, but it's different. Spatial Studio is here to provide a nice and friendly user interface to all the powerful geospatial functions that exist in the Oracle database. So let's start by quickly importing the customer dataset in Spatial Studio. So just like in DV, we create a new dataset. And in this first version of Spatial Studio, we can import spreadsheets or shapefiles. So we'll point to our customer data spreadsheet. And here's the preview of the data. We can make changes to the table name, the data set name. We can change the column names as well. Let's edit a few columns. Let's remove the spaces from the column names and hit OK. So our data set gets created. It shows up in the list of data sets right there. And we want to go and geocode the addresses. So we're going to click on the right click menu here, go to Prepare, Geocode Addresses. So dialog box will come up and Spatial Studio already has identified a few columns as candidates for geocoding, but we can override and modify this and specify exactly what we want to geocode. So what is an address, what is a country, what is a zip code, and so on. And once we're done, we just click Apply. And that kicks off a job in the database to geocode all the addresses. As the job completes, notice the dataset icon that is changing in the background. So just like in DV, we can now visualize these customers on a map. So let me create a project. Now let me add a visualization. Let me pick a map. And now I'll go back to my data elements and pick my customer data set right there, drag it onto the map. And here are my customers being plotted on the map. So right there in Spatial Studio, I can already go and customize several settings on the visualization, opacity, thickness, colors. So let's change the color, for instance. But there's one important thing we haven't done yet on the data set, which is marked on that exclamation mark icon here, is we need to set it up with a primary key. So I'm going to Properties, Columns, and I will select the column to be the primary key. Let me pick Customer ID. Let me OK that, validate the key, and apply. And the icon is gone now. The dataset has a primary key, so we can now fully use it. But let me take a quick pause. What we could already do here is export this customer geocoded dataset back into DV so that we could visualize all these customers precisely and blend it with the policy data. So let's take a minute to briefly demo this. So I can go into my dataset here and export it. I'll select the format to be GeoJSON, it could have been CSV, and I will select only the columns that I'm interested in this case, a customer ID and the geometry column that was just created by the geocoding. So here's my zip file with the layer. And all I need to do now is to go back to DV, create a custom layer. So I can do this from the console menu, maps, and add a map layer. So I'm going to add this, point to the JSON file, the GeoJSON file we just exported. I'm going to specify customer ID as the primary key for this layer. And here we go, the layer is being added into DV. I can go back to my dataset, and now if I select customer ID and visualize this on a map, it will automatically recognize that there is this layer that shows the customer addresses, so not just the cities, the exact addresses on a map. But for now, let's just go back to Spatial Studio, and we are interested in comparing these customer locations with the predicted path of the hurricane. So I went on a public website and I did download a set of shape files showing the predicted path of the hurricane. So I'm now going to import these shapes into Spatial Studio. So these are shape files and I have several files to select. I'll click OK, and here is my new shape, and I'll give it a name and say OK. And the hurricane data set is getting created. Here we go. And we can right away visualize the hurricane path on a map. So we're going to create a project, drag a map visualization on the project, then drag the data set on that map, and we should be able to visualize the path of the hurricane. Here we go. So now we can also plot our customers on the map so we can see which one intersect. So I need to bring up the data set from customers, and then I'll drag it on the map. So now we can see all of our customers and the hurricane path. But what we want to do is to identify all the customers that are living in a buffer zone of, let's say, 50 kilometers around that path. So we need to create a spatial calculation that defines that buffer and then intersect customers with that zone. Let's do this. So we're going to run a first spatial analysis on the hurricane path, a transformation to create a buffer. So let's click on this, and the dialog box here is making the process very simple. So let me give it a name. Let's specify the distance. So we want 100 kilometers. So we want 50 kilometers left and right. So 100,000 meters, and we run it. So as the process completes, it generates a new data set. I'm going to drag it on the map, and we now can see the buffer on the map. So this gives me already a visual indication of customers that are in that buffer, but we need to run a spatial analysis that identifies precisely which customer addresses fall into the shape of that buffer. So let's run that analysis, and in this case we want to run an intersection function, so return shapes that are inside another shape. So we're going to give it a name, and we just follow the dialog box. So these are the geometries that are contained, the customers, and these are the geometries that are containing, so the hurricane. And we just run this, and this generates another data set, which I just have to drag on the map again. So let's give it a different color so it's visible. Let's make this blue, for instance. Let me go to settings, make this blue. So these are the customers that are in the range of 50 miles of the tornado, the customers at risk. Let's click back to the full map, and let me quickly save this. Let me call it customers at risk. So now what we need to do is to export these customers that we have identified into Oracle DVS, so we can blend this list with business data and analyze asset value at risk. So let me go back to the data sets, and if I go to the menu here, I can export this data set. I will select CSV. I can select the columns that I'm interested. Let me keep them all. And here's my CSV dataset file. So now let me switch back to DV, create a dataset, import that customer at risk CSV as a dataset. I'll create that. I will go back to the project that we had created earlier on. I will add this dataset to the project. So add the data set that we just created. We could have done this in one shot, but I did it in 2 steps. And here is our customer at risk. So let's check that it joined correctly with the other data sets. So I'll go to the data diagram, and yes, the join was found. I could fix this manually as well. Now let me go back to visualize, and now I can bring my customers at risk as a new layer on the existing map. So let me create an additional layer. So we still have the all customer layer, and I'm just going to drag lat and long of the customer at risk in my new layer. And here we go. Let me change the color. Let me drag country as an attribute, for instance, and let me change the color for the map. Let me make this red. So now we see our customers at risk in DV here. So at this point, I have both my spatial analysis data and my business data joined in the same environment. So I can easily produce several visualizations indicating for only these customers what is the value at risk, and all sorts of visualizations around this to get the necessary insights for my business. So this is pretty powerful blending of robust capabilities that reside both on the database and on OAC to deliver very advanced and valuable functional insight. Thank you for watching this video.